Hi, I'm Cody Alexander with MatchQuarters.com. Today I'm going to talk about self-scouting and analytics. Basically, how do you use data to make yourself better? I think it's one of the biggest topics that's really never covered by coaches. I think a lot of coaches at the lower levels feel like, well, how can I do this when I only have 4 or 5 guys on staff, and really only a couple of them that I trust to even work with numbers. Um, not everybody's got quality control or analyst or a bunch of young middle school coaches, for instance, like some of the 6A schools here in Texas have that can kind of run some numbers. So to me, one of the things that I've kind of done this past year is really kind of develop a system of where we can look at analytics in a sense that, one, how's it going to make us better? Two, how can we quantify some of the things that we're doing in order for us to get better? And three, identifying things that can give us kind of a leg up on the opposition in terms of what are we doing. I think the biggest thing, everybody kind of has their own way of opponent scouting and attacking that. But to me, I think the biggest thing is looking inward instead of outward. I think most coaches would agree that, if you can make things better for your kids in terms of maybe the pedagogy is a little bit better, the wording is a little bit better, the way that you are calling things are a little bit more intuitive and adaptive. And to me, that's the key, is to getting the kids to play fast and understanding what they're doing. Not just kind of like, hey, I've got this Cheesecake Factory playbook and I've got this, I've got the thing hanging on my belt loop that extends all the way down to my ankle, and now I'm raising it up and looking at it, and I'm just kind of just picking and choosing and hoping it works. I'll never forget, I work for Phil Bennett, who worked for Dave Wannstedt at Pitt, and he told a story about how Jimmy Johnson one time told him they were in a boat in Miami, typical Jimmy Johnson story, and he looked at Coach Bennett and he said, "Look, if I catch you looking at your call sheet, I'll tell Coach Wannstedt he needs to fire you right now." And so to me, it's kind of like, how can you get to certain things to know and understand how those things work, and then why they're working, and then creating kind of a better picture for your players so that you can then create a better call sheet. You can create a better defense, and you got, hey, maybe we're not teaching this the right way, or hey, maybe the kids don't understand this, or hey, we've called this a few times, this really works, maybe we need to start building on this, maybe this is fitting us. Because at the end of the day, going back to the Jimmy Johnson story, is you have to know your defense and you have to know the answers to it. It's like knowing the answers to the test. That's what makes elite coaches, is knowing the answers to the test. How are people attacking you? What are the answers to if a team attacks you this way, or hey, this just isn't working, what's the next best thing? So to me, that's kind of where I've been in the past year of really studying hard on self-scouting and analytics. During the COVID lockdown, I wrote a book on opponent breakdown. And so kind of the catalyst for that was like, kind of, okay, that's it in chapter. Now let's look inward instead of outward. How can I make myself better, and really kind of look at what we're doing and things like that. So that's kind of where this is going to go. Why use data? Because there's a lot of people, especially that I've run into, that are just like, hey man, this is my defense, this is what I do. We really aren't great judges of ourselves. We look in the mirror and we always hear this, well, you need to look in the mirror. Well, that's great and all, but we always have this kind of, we don't want to look at ourselves in a bad way. And especially when we talk with young kids, we want to mirror that for our kids. And so to me, it's kind of like, I want to always have this positive attitude. So to me, I want to make sure that I also understand, hey, I'm not a great judge of myself. I think I'm awesome. I think most people think they're awesome. I think most kids that we run into, they also think they're awesome. I mean, it's like, how many kids have we had that are like, they think they're a Division I football player. And it's like, dude, I hope you graduate. So to me, it's kind of the same way, is that let's look inward instead of outward. How can I look at myself in a critical eye and get better? Kind of let's lose the ego. And I think that to me has been the biggest thing in the past year that I've tried to do. One thing that COVID's really taught to me is like, really like, your family systems and the support systems and all those things that you just kind of took for granted. Now you're all of a sudden like, man, I kind of need this. I'm kind of floating here. I need to have an idea. So having this, like in terms of a football knowledge, is really being able to look inward at a critical eye and say, hey, man, I'm not doing a good job here. And I always go back to kind of like that extreme ownership of things, of like, look, if it's not going right, it's on me. Let me look inward on it, and let's do that. I think if you use data, it steers you clear of bias. And now look, we've all been there. You can create numbers to look like anything. You know what I mean? Like I had to talk to a coach one time that said that he worked for a defensive coordinator that said that they were the best rush defense in the country. And then then you look at it and that's because everybody's passing for like 400 yards on them. So nobody was running the ball against them because it was too easy to pass. It's kind of, or the other way around. It's like, oh, look, we have the best passing defense, but yeah, we're giving up like 300, 400 yards on rushing. Well, if it's going to be their offenses are going to take the path of least resistance. So yes, I'm not talking about that. Remember, everything in this is talking about in terms of a critical eye inward, that I can't just say, well, this is the way that we've always done it, so it has to work. Because I'm sure coaches have had this experience before. They worked at one place and it was awesome. And then you go to the next place and you try and teach it the exact same, carbon copy, and it just doesn't work because every single place is different. It's a different ecosystem. The kids are different. The people around you are different. There's just different everything. So you have to kind of figure out what it works. And I think that if you use data and you do it the correct way, then now you start to think of things in more of a critical eye, you're able to adjust to certain things. You're able to kind of look at things in kind of more of a detachment, where I think that as coaches, we get so ingrained in the season that it's just Monday we do this, Tuesday we do this, Wednesday we do this, Thursday we do this, Friday we play a game, or if you're in college, it's Saturday we play a game. And so we just kind of keep going over and over, and we just keep doing the same thing. And so we have this thing that we call our defense, and this is what we are, this is who we are. And you've heard it all the time, but then you never detach yourself away and say, hey, the past couple of weeks, teams have been attacking us this way, or the past couple of weeks, this really hasn't been working for us very well. Maybe we need to take a step back and look at the way that we're teaching this. And so having a system of data points that really looks at that, it clears up the bias for you. Identify deficiencies quicker. You can quickly identify. Look, remember, go back to the very one. We're not great judges of ourselves. Hey, this doesn't look like it's working. Then you look at the data and you're like, oh, it's our best call that we have in the sheet. It's just that one time that we gave up that touchdown. And that's the only thing that I think of, because that's recency bias, because maybe it just happened to us game, or maybe you're kind of you think negatively. And so, man, I only remember the bad stuff. I don't remember the good stuff. And so to me, I think when it identifies deficiencies quicker and you can adjust, hey, this isn't working. The past 3 weeks, it's been atrocious. What are we doing? How are we teaching it? Let's take 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes and let's say, okay, let's clinic each other. What are we doing in this? How are we teaching it? Okay, maybe it's a first down, base call that you call on first down, early downs, and it's supposed to be a run stopping pressure. And then all of a sudden you're just getting gashed all the time. Okay, well, how are we teaching it? And then you find out that, one of the defensive linemen, the D line coach was teaching it a certain way that they didn't understand it. And so now they keep doing the wrong thing and now we're a gap short. And so to me, that's kind of where you can get that. And then it's, okay, now we need to adjust the way that we teach this. Maybe this wording worked for one kid, but this wording worked for another kid. And that goes to the last thing, which is the pedagogical flaws or athletic deficiencies. Look, are we just playing teams that are better than us? Because we've all been there. Don't get me wrong. The best players win games. It's not the best schemes don't win games, because we've all seen it. We've met coaches that are not very good coaches, but they have great kids, yet they win a ton of games. And then you've seen it the other way around, where, man, I've met great coaches that, look, they just work in their community, and their community just doesn't produce a bunch of Division I athletes, and so they're just not going to win a bunch of games. But they're great coaches, and the kids play hard. So again, is it pedagogical flaw? Are we teaching it the wrong way? Or is it just that, look, we're asking kids to do something that they just can't do, or we're going up against a talent that is just, it's far superior than us? Because I think we've all been there. I mean, whether you've won a state championship or you've gone 0-10, we've all been there. I mean, I've been there. Look, I've won a Big 12 championship, and I've also gone 0-10 in a season where the average score is 56-6. I mean, we were playing a bunch of juniors that should have been playing JV against a bunch of varsity kids. So it's like, look, let's just keep things simple. Let's just make things work. And then, look, let's try and find the small victories. Then on the other hand, when we won the Big 12 championship, it was like, look, we're fantastic, but how can we get better? Like, yeah, we're great, but how can we get better? So again, it's that regardless of whether you're 0-10 or you're 16-0 here and won a state championship here in the state of Texas, how can we get better? What are the constantly pushing the limit on how are we teaching things? Or is it, hey, look, we're asking kids to do something that they just can't do. Like for instance, I'm trying to play heavy technique on the stunt, and he just can't get across the tackle. Like we're playing Division I tackles that are 6'9", 300 pounds. I mean, we saw some this year. We're asking kids to close the B gap, and they can't even get around a guy because he's just too big. So let's talk about bias real quick. So anchoring bias, we tend to over rely on the very first piece of information that we get. We're visual learners, okay? 80% of all people are visual learners. We tend to remember the last thing that we thought. You can go back to trials, eyewitnesses. Think about the last game that you play. You're usually only going to remember certain things. But as a coach, that anchoring bias, I want you to think of the very first year that you coached. There are probably certain things that you did that year that you still do now. And why do you do them? If you've never really looked at it and asked yourself, why did I do this? Then maybe you have anchoring bias. And so what data can do for you is really eliminate that anchoring bias. It can really kind of fix a lot of that. It can say, look, this was a great call in 2020, not a great call in 2021, or this was a great call in 2019. 2020 wasn't a great call for us. Okay, so what, just because I fell in love with it and it was great in 2019 doesn't mean that it's going to work now. Maybe the offense is caught up. Maybe the kid that we had running this deal was just a freak, or maybe we changed districts and now that doesn't really work anymore. So we have to understand really how we are doing things. One of the examples that I've always used for anchoring bias is my book Match Quarters. I wrote that book because I thought I was a fraud. We got to a season, we weren't very good, and I kind of looked at everything. I had all these young DBs, they were really talented, and I was like, I'm doing them a disservice if all I'm doing is teaching it the way that I learned it at Baylor. Okay, I'm now 4 years removed, 5 years removed. Okay, those were elite athletes. How am I teaching these kids? Am I doing them the service? And so what I ended up doing was basically deconstructing everything, all the way down to stance, alignment, technique. What are we calling things? How are we doing it? What's the pedagogy behind it? And breaking it down. And that's eventually what ended up being the book. Was I tried to detach myself from anchoring bias and try to really look at, okay, I remember this. It worked for us. Okay, I won a Big 12 championship running this defense, but is this the way that I need to be running it now, here in the present time? And I think that's important, especially for younger coaches. Maybe you worked at a really good program starting out, and so it really worked there. And hey, we had all the success, but now I'm at this new program that's kind of mediocre, or I have different kids. How can I now adapt what's that? Hey, this really worked. And then now I'm looking at the data, man, this isn't working anymore. Okay, well, maybe we need to change the teaching. And so to me, anchoring bias is one of those big ones. Availability bias. We tend to make decisions based on immediate information. So we tend to look at the last game and then we're like, oh, we played terrible, and now we're a terrible defense. Or, hey, we played great, we're riding this high, but yet, hey, maybe, a couple of guys didn't do their assignments and it was kind of one of those good job, bad jobs, or maybe the offense kind of turned it over, or maybe we did something that it wasn't very sound, but it worked. Okay, so man, let's keep calling it. But then I remember in the first game, we called the same thing and it didn't work. That's where data catches you. It's like, okay, we've called this thing like 4 or 5 times. we called it 3 times in this game and it worked fantastic, but the other 2 times it didn't work. Okay, let's go back and find out why those things didn't work. Maybe it was the personnel call, maybe it was down a distance, maybe it was an offense that we were playing that didn't work. And so now as you build data throughout the season, you kind of paint a bigger picture of okay, I'm not just looking at a one-hit deal where this worked against this opponent, it's got to work against this opponent. Because as we all know, as you go through the season, you're really living a different life week to week in terms of, hey, this team was terrible last week, but then, man, they fought us really hard this week. Or, hey, man, did you see that team? They got blown out in the first week, but now we're in week 4 and they look really tough. This isn't the same team. What's going on? So again, being able to have that data and even looking, and again, going back to that looking inward deal, is now that we look inward, now we can see, okay, there's some growth or there's regression. How can we help that regression and how can we keep that growth going and being a catalyst for it and using data for that? The ostrich effect, we tend to ignore information that is negative. Look, that's what we tell our kids all the time. Be positive, be positive, be positive. As coaches, I feel like we're always positive. And most of us, and I'm guilty of this too. Look, man, I think we can beat anybody. I don't care who we're playing. It doesn't matter. So to me, it's like, look, ostrich. I got my head in the sand. It doesn't matter. What data does for you is really what it does. It builds on all these things, right? So I've got, hey, this is our defense. This is what we're doing. But then, hey, we're not doing very good in these certain things. I can't hide from that because the numbers are showing that. Okay. I can't hide from the data. The data's sitting there saying, looking me in the face and it's staring me and it's saying, look, we're not doing a very good job doing these things. Okay. So that's why I said stay positive, but let's look at the data and let's make sure that we're doing the right thing. Recency bias. We tend to view recent information in a clearer light than past or future ones. So what are the trends? Okay. Again, it goes with that ostrich effect and that availability. But if you notice, a lot of these things kind of build on each other's. Okay. If we only know what we know, right? I can't look into the future. A lot of people, the big thing in coaching is, well, I don't look ahead, on to Cincinnati, as Coach Belichick says. But in terms of that, I get that. And you need to be present in that week, but we need to start looking at trends. Hey, teams are attacking us this way. We need to have an answer for that later on down the road. Maybe this week we don't have to worry about it, but next week, hey man, they got that receiver that they're going to see this deficiency. They're a good coach staff. They're definitely self-scouting. I mean, they're definitely opponent scouting us. We need to make sure we have an answer for that. So I think it gives you things that you can build on. What are we doing? Okay, how can we flip that? How can we create a different defensive formation to make that look differently, but then we're playing something else? Hey, we've done this now the past couple of weeks. How can we flip the script on that? So again, data shows you what you're doing and how you can change it. And even down to the call sheet. Hey, our third downs haven't been very good. What are we calling on third down? Let's go look at that. Let's go hey, we were good this week, but man, the past couple of weeks, our numbers just aren't there. So maybe we need to go look back, or hey, we were really good first week, but man, the past couple of weeks, we have not been doing very well on third down, or maybe we haven't been doing good coming out. Different things that you can tell through just by simple data points that can really kind of erase that recency bias. Okay. So now the important thing, those are the biases, kind of the philosophy. What do we use? Okay, first of all, we use explosive plays versus what the calls that we use, and then who are they targeting? Okay, so what I usually do after every game is I get the explosive runs, that's any run over 10 yards, and then I take the explosive passes, that's any pass completed for over 15 yards. Okay, and I look at it. What were the calls? Were they all different? Or are there some trends going on there? Maybe, hey, we called this thing 5 times and 3 of them had explosive plays on it. Okay, something's not right with that call. Let's go back and review it. And so when you're sitting there in the weekends, you can quickly go back and you can pull these cut-ups up and you can quickly go back and you can look at it. What I like to do is I like to sort it by formation, play, and then go through and kind of look at the calls. Like how many, hey, this call showed up, we had 10 explosive plays. This call showed up 5 times. Okay. 1, why are we calling it 5 times? And 2, what are we doing and why is that given up? Then I'll also look at target. Are they targeting a certain side? Are they targeting one of my corners? Are they targeting one of my safeties? Are they running at one of my players? Are they doing something to my defense? And that this target keeps showing up, because remember, it's about the players. It's players, not plays. So are they attacking my players? And then I go and I look at the call. Am I giving the kids the best solution? Or am I giving the kids the best opportunity to win? What we use is what I call simple efficiency data. And I'll dig deep into this, and I'll show you what it all looks like later on. Simple efficiency data is basically down and distance win rate. What we do on first down, did we hold them under 3 yards? Yes, no. Okay. Second down, did we hold them under half of the conversion rate? Yes, no. Third down, did we win? Fourth down, did we win? Now, I've talked before on my Substack about, just looking at win rate, but I do think when you're looking at something in season that you just need a quick little look at is like, did we win it? Did we not win it? Okay, we won this. We're winning first down. That's great, but we're not doing very well in second down. What is our call structure there? What's the personnel? Are they running against us? Are they passing against us? Are we calling certain pressures that are working, that aren't working? And then obviously, what is the coverage versus the pass? Okay, maybe, hey, yeah, and I've had this before, and I've talked about this before on a couple of podcasts and clinics of just, it in 2018, we were really multiple against trips. People didn't know what we were going to do, but at the same time, it was like we were a jack of all trades, but a master at none. The following year, all we did was basically run stress. Okay, much better production because we knew what we were doing. And it goes down to any scheme. I don't care if you're a middle of the field open or middle of the field close. If the kids know what they're doing and they have confidence in it, they're probably going to be okay. I think at the end of the day, scheme is really more or less a philosophy. Football's football. I tell the kids all the time, football is easy. It's about leverage. It's about angles. It's about geometry. If you can figure that out and you can get plus numbers in anything, then you're probably going to be okay. If you can get your players to just understand the game and to rally and to understand what their job is and to play with leverage, you're probably going to win more than you lose. And so I tell the kids all the time, don't make football hard. Sometimes it's easy. Okay. So sometimes it is just, hey, we're doing too much. We need to cut it back. Look at this. This last game, we called like 15 different pressures. None of them were any good. So, or, hey, these 5 core pressures were really good. That's because the kids know it. Let's do that. And then kind of build the onion from there instead of just saying, hey, I got this Cheesecake Factory menu of things to do. I've got this call sheet that's as tall as me. Let me just go ahead and call all this stuff. And I've worked with people before, and I've seen guys before that are just like, I got to get to my calls. I got to get to my calls. Like, we put this in, I got to get it, and it's like, well, just because you have it in doesn't mean you have to call it, right? Like, just because it's there doesn't mean you have to do it. And then mayhem. What calls are creating negative plays? We track every 0 play and negative play, and we consider that mayhem, because anytime you get a 0-yard gain on a play, that's just as good as a negative play, because they didn't gain anything from it. So to us, we try and track. I know a lot of people track mayhem in terms of forced fumbles, recoveries, interceptions, basically turnovers, tackles for loss, things like that. But for us, what we're trying to do is really just track, look, how many negative to 0 plays can we create, and then come up with a percentage and see what that looks like. So how do we separate it year to year? Okay. So we have a post game. And so at the top right here, I would fill this out. Did we win it? What was the total call or total against it? And then we create a percentage from that, less than 3 on P and 10. And I separate P and 10 because we want to track what we look like when we coming out. One of the coolest things that happened during this, when I was creating this, was I went back and I looked at the guy I worked with. He picked a game he felt like they did really well, a game they felt like they did just okay, and then a game that he was like, man, we were bad. But one trend that came out was that he didn't pressure very much on P and 10, but when he did, when he did pressure on PN10, it was really good. And so one of the things that we came away from with was like, look, we've got to pressure more on PN10. It's no different than what these offensive guys are talking about right now of, hey, passing on first down is sexy, right? Because passing's more efficient. Get down the field, cut the chains, get the defense loosened up. So that way, if you do want to run the ball on second down, they're a little bit more gun shy because they think you're going to pass. So again, defense is the same way. Be aggressive on first down, especially coming out, maybe get them back, man, you're setting yourself up for success down the road. So we look at P&10, first and 10, second and 10, or second down, third down, fourth down, and then we do a total. Now, this is what I look at. This is just an example of personnel. So we look at, like I said, we do personnel, we do versus the run versus the pass, which is covered. So we do call versus run, coverage versus the pass, we do pressures, and then we look at overall that. And what I normally do is we look at it objectively after every game. Now, I know you're thinking, well, didn't you just say about recency bias? Well, that's what the bottom part right here is for. So right here, you can see, look, we weren't really good at versus 10 personnel, really, really good against empty, not very good against 11 personnel, really good against 12 personnel. We were okay versus 20. We were pretty good versus 21 personnel. And you can see the numbers and how they build up. So again, what this does is as you're going through the season, this is building your practice. Hey, we're really good against empty. Okay. So we already that tells me we have a good plan. Okay, so maybe we need to just throw in a couple empty plays. Like maybe this team doesn't run very much empty. Okay, maybe we just need to, hey, throw in one empty just so that we see it this week and we kind of have a check for it. Or down the road, you're playing an uber spread team. Okay, we're not very good at 10 personnel. Okay, how are teams attacking us in 10 personnel? Because they're going to see the same things. So then how can we tweak some things like that? So again, just going back through those things. And then postseason, what you're doing in the postseason is really just creating your self-scout. So we keep running numbers throughout the year to ID the trends and to see things as they build through. And then we go game by game so that we can go back and say, well, maybe what was in our game plan that week? Why was this such an issue this week? It's amazing what you can find out when you look at efficiency data like this of just, did we win the down or did we not win the down? So that's kind of been a big coup for us this year. So I'll break down what that looks like. So post game, quick look at the numbers. Okay. We don't want to spend too much time on it. We just kind of want to look, okay, where were we under 50%? Where were we over 67, 70%? Because usually that means it. And then obviously you're looking at it. If we ran one thing one time and it hit, like obviously it's 100. Trying to look, if you think about a typical game, you're looking at 60 to 75 plays, depending on the type of offenses that you're running. So if you're calling things 5-6 times, that's usually that's a good amount of your calls. So anything over 4, now we're starting to get some sort of a trend. Where did the fatals come from? Where did the calls come from that created those fatals? What worked well? What didn't work well? Hey, let's take note of this. Hey, this blitz worked well. How's that looked? And then I could pull up historical data. Hey, we're in game 5. Hey, this blitz worked really well. How has that been doing all year? Hey, okay, last 5 games, it really hadn't worked out well. I guess it was just this week. Well, maybe, okay, let's carry it into this week. Let's see, they're a similar opponent. Now we can do it. Or, hey, this is completely different. Maybe we don't need to be using it this week. Or, hey, man, this thing's hit like every week. And every time we've called it, maybe we've only called it once or twice each week. And it's really done really well. We need to call it more. And so now you kind of bump it up in your call sheet. How do calls stack up against down and distance? Look, I've said this before, not every call is built for every down and distance. You're not going to be running, a 5-0 pressure, simulated pressure on first down, unless it's a pass heavy team. You're not going to do a run stunt on 3rd and long. So again, it's just kind of one of those things of just, hey, I messed up and I called this on. This isn't a great passing down. Like we found out this year, one of our stunts that we would call on. It was really a 3rd down stunt, and we were calling it on first down. And then we looked back and we we're like, yeah, we don't need to be calling that on first down. And so we just quit calling it on first down. So it's one of those constant reminders, like, hey, the data reminded me that doesn't work on first down. I need to be more 2nd and long, 3rd and long. And so now I've moved that over in the call sheet to here. Hey, that doesn't work on first down this year. it works over here on that's a second and long, third and long call. And then obviously anything glaring, base call that didn't work. Hey, we called this like 5, 6, 7 times and it only hit like 2 or 3 times. So, why is that not working? And again, what it does is it really allows you to look objectively at the game and not waste time just watching film, because we've all been there where, look, you don't want to be a consumer. You want to be a producer. And really, even then, you want to be a creator, right? Like, I don't want to just sit and consume film just to watch a game, just so I can say that I watched the game. Like, I want something productive to come from that. So now I'm looking at the data, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, I'm building my practice plan for this week, especially if it's a like opponent. If you're going from like a 2-back Y off team, and then, okay, well, the next 3 weeks, that's what we're seeing. Okay, well, now I know I need to work these things these weeks, because man, we weren't good at this. That's how teams are going to attack you. Let's be honest. We all steal from each other. Offenses are no different. Hey, that worked this week. I've played offenses that literally ran things that worked the week before, and then you just saw them the next week. Like, you just knew, like, okay, when we play this team, whatever we gave up the week before, that's their offense. And that's how they build their offense. And so basically what it does is, if you use data, you're not just throwing things at the wall and saying, okay, I hope this works. I hope I'm doing this right in Indy. Now, you have a clear picture of, hey, this didn't work this week, or hey, past couple of weeks, this stunt hasn't worked. Maybe let's go back and reteach that. We have it, or, hey, we need a refresher on one of our base stunts, or one of our how we fit this, or hey, this play has been starting to pop up. Now we can do it. One of the biggest plays for us was duo this year with the RPO off of it. Man, don't get it twisted. We were working that every single week as much as we could, trying to come up with ways that, hey, how can we deal with that with Y off duo and RPOs off of it? How can we better prepare our kids for that? So again, the glaring things, and then also, what do we need to work on building your practice plan for the week? Mid-season is important. Try and find somewhere between that 5th, 6th game. Are we seeing trends in the data? Is something going down? Is something going up? Do we need to call this more? Do we need to call this less? Hey, let's just scrap this. Hey, we need to come up with some more pressures that are similar to this, and let's build upon this. And so, and not everybody is blessed with a bye week in the middle of the season, or, you don't have time. But if you keep the data, you can quickly just let's take 30 minutes to an hour today, just a little bit extra, just so we can look at the trends and let's create something, let's build on something, or hey, man, let's just get rid of this, or hey, let's scrap this, but keep note, this is something that we're going to come back to in the off season. Maybe we're not teaching it better, and maybe not we're teaching it right. So again, do we need to peel back on some calls? Who are we? I've been on teams where halfway through the year, we were like, dude, we're not a 4-down team. We're a 3-4, and then completely switched to a 3-4. I've been there. So, or vice versa, so again, this year for us, it was, we had this hybrid 3-high system, but we got all these young kids. Finally, we were just like, look, man, we're a bare 0 team. We got kids that can play man. And then we got these young kids that are up front. Let's just gap them out. Let's send them. Let's let them play fast. And, the last 3 weeks ended up being relatively successful for us. So again, it's one of those things of, who are we? Man, these things aren't working. These things are. This is who we are. This is who we're not. Let's scrap that. Let's build on what we are. And I think every coach understands each year is completely different. It's just completely different. If you're not changing every year, if you're not adapting every year, if you're not tweaking things every year, then eventually you're going to get fetched, if you haven't already been. So again, going back through those trends, do we need to call something more? Do we need to create anything to build off success? So again, going back to that data. And then finally, with the postseason, it's a robust look at everything, critical eye. A lot of guys, they get to the end of the season and then it's just like, okay, guys, I mean, it was successful. We won some games, or it was, man, we were really bad. And then it's just kind of like, okay, I'll see you guys in the spring. And then it's just, you don't ever look at and I've been on stuff like that. They're just like, or you do a bunch of work on data, but then you never look at it. I've been on that too. You have a big old data book that we never looked at. And it's like, it has all these numbers. None of them mean anything. Nobody knows what anything does. And it wasn't going to change. We're still going to call the same call. So again, what I want to do, I never want to be that coach that's like, I'm not willing to adapt. I'm not willing to change. I'm not willing to look at the data and say, okay, maybe we do need some help here. So for me, a robust look at everything, I think, and again, that I go back to the beginning, the biases, detachment, being able to look at yourself in a critical eye. Again, we're not very good at looking at ourselves like that. Fine tooth comb, go break down every single call that you ran at least 4 or 5 times. A couple of those 3-2-1 hitters, those were probably special D deals, or you realized early those weren't working. Maybe, hey, I really kind of like this. Maybe we go back and tweak it. What are we good at? What didn't work? Again, building on who's coming back. Hey, this worked because we had this kid over here. This worked because we had a boundary corner that was Division I kid. Hey, this worked because we had big D linemen. Now we're changing. Those things might not work. So what are we going to do? Look at totals and trends. And I been there, weren't very good at the run, but we were great at the pass. Weren't great at the pass, but we're good at the run. How can we change that? What can we do? Do we need to move some players? Do we need to do some calls? Maybe some calls, put the secondary in some binds. Maybe we need to look at different coverage behind those, or how can we tweak those? One of the biggest things for us this year was how can we create more 4-down pressures, being able to we see so much pass and so much RPO. How can we keep coverage integrity, but still apply pressure? That was the biggest thing for us. So in our off-season study, that was part of the deal. It was like, how can we create more replacement pressures, also known as creepers? How can we run some more sims? What are things that we can do to kind of keep that coverage integrity, but at the same time apply pressure where it needs to be, but we're not losing that coverage integrity because we see really good quarterbacks. I mean, we're seeing a couple Division I quarterbacks. So that to me has been kind of the biggest thing from this past year. I like to look at what's called defensive value, right? So yards needed to score a touchdown, and then the actual yards gained. And then you also look at the EPA, and that creates kind of this defensive value of, that kind of we're at a point in time where, and I think Saban alluded to this, this off season, of just like, there is no such thing as great defenses anymore. You're not, and what I mean by that is, and don't get me wrong, if you're somebody sitting there like, hey man, we only gave up 7 points a game, great. But what I'm saying is that offenses have evolved to the point, and the game with the rules and the way it's played has evolved to a point where you're just not going to get those teams that are just dominating week to week to week on defense, that you're just killing everybody, unless you just have superior talent. That when teams are evenly matched, you're going to give up points. And so a lot of defensive coaches, older defensive coaches, have really struggled in the past couple of years of, how can I quantify what is good defense? And so one thing to look at this is like points per drive. How many points are we giving up per drive? EPA. Now, EPA is interesting, and it's expected points allowed. So what I did is, because 6A high school football here in the state of Texas is so similar to the college game, I kind of took the EPA data from college football and I kind of applied it kind of as an experiment to see what that would look like for us. And it kind of held true, because we do play on an NCAA field. We do see kind of the same disparity in talent week to week as you would kind of expect in college football. Obviously, some districts here are better than others. But for us, we really looked at how many yards did they need, how many yards did they gain, and then looking at kind of that EPA, what was the expected point total that they were there, from their starting point, and then what actual points did they score, and then kind of subtracting that to create, did we create value or did we find negative value? So for instance, let's say they start on a yard line that has like a 2.14 EPA, and we ended up giving a field goal up. Well, then we would have negative 0.86 defensive value for that drive. But if we eliminate it, let's say they had a punt, well, then we gain 2.14 EPA value. So it's a way to constructively look at how much value were we gaining on each drive. And you can see when we give up a lot of points, we're not doing very well. When we're not giving up a lot of points, we're doing really well. And turnovers count to that too. And so it ends up kind of balancing out. But for me, looking at, again, it's trying to find and experiment with data points that work. One of the things that I did like was the yards needed. So for instance, they get the ball on the 20, they need 80 yards. If they only drive 30 yards, they only got 30 out of those 80 yards. Okay. And so that percentage we'll take and just say, okay, that's good, right? Because they didn't get that much. If they, we want to hold them under obviously 50%. We don't want to give them half that up, because the closer they get to the end zone, now they're going to score. And I think the biggest thing with the postseason and using data is that you're creating your off-season studies. You're essentially creating, hey, like for instance, we needed to find more 4-down pressures because we're seeing more RPOs, we're seeing more passing game, but we still need to be able to hold up against the run. How can we kind of apply pressure in a safe way, but not using fire zones? So to me, that was our big off-season study. How looking at different ways for that. So if you create data points like that, then now you're looking at, okay, this didn't work, but we like it. How can we make it better? Or, hey, this worked, man, we need to start building on this. I talked to a coach one time that kind of did the similar thing. They started noticing, man, anytime we call a trap to pressure, it was really working. So that was our off-season study, is how can we create a couple, 3 or 4 more trap 2 pressures we're not asking the kids to do anything brand new, but maybe we can structure these things and we can create different looks for opponents because trap 2 pressures were working. So for us, that's what that does. Or like I stated earlier, pedagogy wise, man, I need to break down the way that we were calling things and make it simpler for the kids and reteach the way they were doing. And then that's kind of what I said the genesis of the Match Quarters book was going back and looking at it with a critical eye. So application, what does this look like? How do I do this? And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of how I do this. Okay, so this is basically this is postseason. So what I'm showing you right now is postseason. This is basically every play that was run in any game. And so I create this data. And then what I do from there, and so I do this for every game. And then at the end of the season, I go back and I double check everything, make sure it's right. So what I'll do is I'll pull out all the P and 10s. And I have an efficiency data, as you can see right there. And I take all of it after turnover, start, possession, and I just pull this out. And so what's nice is you can pull these from Huddle. You just export it from Huddle. And it turns it into this. And I have these and I create value. All you got to do is create these little value where you can create a Dropbox. And then I could sort it really quickly and drag it, copy and paste it. So then again, I've created this efficiency deal, and you have to put this in first of all, you have to put this in Huddle. You have to create a custom column wherever you want it to be. I put mine between gain, loss, and result. And then I have a formula for each one that I've built in Excel. And I just kind of run it through there. And the nice thing about it is that because of this, I can say, okay, how many yeses were there? All right. There were, let's see. Okay. I've got 43 yeses out of how many plays. And then I just go back and I select all. Okay. And it's look there. Okay. Go all the way through, back up. Okay. 43 out of 120, 102. Okay. That's not very good. So again, and so what you do is you come over here in the season and you can go through each one. And so as you see, you can go through all these numbers. Now, we didn't put them in. They were a flex bone team, and so that's why we didn't want to skew our data for what we were doing, because most of our offense, they're kind of not a like opponent for anybody else. So again, what I would do is I would take this, and you can go through and you can create these win rates. And so then I would double check and make sure they were correct. First and 10, and again, you do this for first and 10, second down, third down, fourth down. And so what you end up creating is like a full defensive efficiency. And so you can see overall we were 50%, which I would say that even though we ended up 3-7, we were probably, you could argue that there were a couple games we probably could have won, how that looked like. And so you can go see that, hey, we were really good against JJ Pierce. We were really good against Skyline. What were some of the other things that we had issues with? Personnel. Again, this is what it would look like after the game. I think you guys saw that earlier. And then what this looked like total for the season. And then again, I take all these calls, and it's all first down runs. And what this looks like for calls, pressures, again, total season pressures, coverage efficiency. And then I do mayhem, which is all, this is all 0 to negative plays, and then the call behind it. And then I take explosive plays against the numbers, and then I have them all sorted for different things. And so this is something that it takes me maybe an hour to do total while I'm doing this. But it gives us a really good picture. So that's the big one that I have there. And that's what my sheet looks like. So again, you take that data from Huddle, you sort it out into each one, then you take it and you do it by what was the overall efficiency for that? What was it versus each personnel group? What were calls versus the run? Pressures, just overall pressures, run pass, it doesn't matter. Coverage efficiency, mayhem. And then I was going to experiment with field zone. I didn't have time to get to it this year, but I do think that it would be interesting to see, like, do you call a lot of pressures in the field zone, or how you're doing your field zones? So that's something to think about in the future. So one of the really cool things that I like that we did this year was drive value. And so again, I wanted to go over that. So you can look at where it started. So each possession, what series it was, what yard line they started out, how many yards to go, where did the drive end, the actual yards, and then the percentage of yards gained. And so for us, I picked because I want to feel really good. So I picked a game that we played really well. So, they only gained 24% of all yards needed to score. So to me, that's really good. Our average field position, what I really like to look to is, and I've been in this situation where you look at the average field position, and in terms of, sometimes you're putting in a bind. This year, our average field position, I think, was like 38, almost to the 40. So we were behind the 8 ball a lot. And then part of that is EPA, and then what the actual score is. Like, for instance, we created a defensive TD, so that was -7. So we created 8.16 points of defensive value. So if you look at it, they had 7.88 defensive value, or value on that. And then what we ended up having, that D value, was 16. So we created 16 points worth of value, or we took 16 points away from the offense. And I think they ended up having a pick 6 or something, a fumble recovered for a touchdown. So they ended up scoring 7, but we really goose egged them. So to me, this is another thing. I also like to look when our offense turns the ball over, how often points off of turnovers for us. Can we hold the offense after they score after our offense has given up a turnover? Here you can see our offense turned the ball over twice, and so we ended up able to come back and we didn't let them score. Even got a safety in this game. So that's another way. That's that D value, and that's yards to go versus yards gained, and then in drive and the actual yards, and then kind of doing the percentage, and then EPA. These are things that I do after the season. I don't do this during the season. It just takes too long. I can quickly do this if I need to, but for the most part, I'm not doing that. But I did want to give you a look at that. So in review, really want to just go through again, you got to have a plan. You got to pick the data points that you think work. Like I said, I think simple efficiency data. Did we win the down? Did we not win the down? I like points per drive. I like to look at explosive plays. I like to look at mayhem stats. How much mayhem are we creating? How many 0 to negative plays are we creating? And how are the calls doing that? You may think that you have a really good call. Hey, it's doing pretty good, but it's averaging like 3 yards a carry and it never shows up on the mayhem. So yeah, you're calling it, but you're not creating anything off of that. That was something that we really looked at this year, is how are these calls doing that? And then how many calls are creating explosive plays? Because we don't want to call those calls because they're creating explosive plays. And then finally, just kind of going through and looking at, I think creating something to where you look at yourself objectively is always going to be important. It's always going to be one of those things where you really want to kind of look at it in a critical eye of what that looks like, being able to detach from it. Like I said, we all suffer from biases. I do too. We all do. How can we get away from that? Looking at, again, at our defense. Remember, our job as coaches is to put the players in the best position to win. And if we're not doing everything we can to look at ourselves objectively and quantify what we're trying to do, then what we're doing is really, we're just guessing. And if you're guessing, you're eventually going to get fetched. And to me, I want to take the guessing out of the game. I want to try and make it as simple as possible for the kids, especially teaching wise. And so what it does is it looks, the game is a test. And so if the kids are failing the test, then we're not doing good preparing them for the test. And really that's, we look at it, most of us that coach are teachers. And so if you look at it that way, if I'm in a classroom and I give a test and, have my kids fail it, okay, well, something's wrong with the way that I'm teaching that. Either the test is wrong or I'm not teaching the kids in a correct manner that they're going to remember that. And look, we can argue about testing all day, but again, playing the game on Friday night, that's the test. If we don't prepare them in practice, if we don't do what's right by the kids, and then they get there on Friday and they're not prepared, that's on us. And so if you're not critically looking at your scheme and you're just constantly just guessing at what you're doing, then you're not doing the kids justice. Again, I always say this, the kids will win in spite of us. The kids will win in spite of us. I've seen it before. There's coaches I've met that have won state championships that are awesome. And then I've met coaches that won state championships that you're like, how did you win a state title? And then you look at the kids that they had, 11 of them play Division I football. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. So, and again, I'm not great. I have faults of my own and I'm trying to get better. And that's why I use data, because I want to try and get better. I use these for our calls, for our cover structures. And I look at it critically at the end of the year of how can I make myself better? I tell young coaches all the time, learn your system. Don't learn a whole bunch of things, learn your system and then try and prove it wrong. And if the things that stick, those tend to be best practices. And so to me, using data helps you find those best practices over and over and over again and find them quickly. And it really, what it does for me, and I noticed it this year, it cuts down on all the kind of the fluff and the small talk on the weekends. We all want to get in the office, figure out the game plan and get home. And so for me is, hey, how can we look at this critically, create a plan of action, and then go execute that plan of action? And it builds your practice. We spent less time developing practice plans this year. We spent less times looking at, kind of like what went wrong. Okay, well, hey, this didn't work. This is what the play was. These were the explosive plays. And then two, doing that, even extending that to tackling and doing some sort of analytics on tackling, I think just would be something to think about as well. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and it gave you just a little bit of it. I didn't want to go too deep into it of all the nitty and gritty and bore you with all the numbers because most people can figure it out. But if you do have questions, more than would love to talk to you about it. It's really a passion of mine. You can find me in a couple places. You can find me at matchquarters.substack.com. That's kind of where I've moved the site to. There are free signups, but you can also pay for kind of pay things. Matchquarters.com still exists. My template shop is there. A lot of my information is there. My link book is there, which is basically my table of contents for everything I've written. And then you can find me on Twitter at the coach _coach_ A. You can hit me up on that if you have a question about this or you want to make contact. Obviously, you can DM me through there, and I would love to answer you, or hit me up through the contact on matchquarters.com. If you hit the QR code right there, you can find the 5 books that I've written. And then obviously, if you follow the hashtag Art of X, you can see everything that I post. So really enjoy it. So this is something that has really been enlightening this past year, and it's something that I've been kind of working on this off season of getting ready and prepared to do it. And I want to thank Coach Rice for allowing me to be part of his this awesome clinic and kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what I've been working on this past year in terms of analytics, which is, again, it's something that just is not talked about very much. Everybody wants to talk about the brand new sim pressure, brand new creeper, but nobody wants to talk about, did it actually work when you ran it? And so to me, this is kind of giving you a little bit of a leg up on your opposition, and because you're looking at it with a critical eye, and you're really looking at what you're doing and trying to make yourself better. So again, as I always say, do better. Appreciate you guys. Again, hit me up if you need anything. I love talking to you guys, and good luck in the summer. Good luck next season.